My name is James Francis, and this is my presentation on my club, Doncaster Rovers, where I'll be outlining certain issues around the club in previous years. This is a quick overview of what I'll be talking about in my presentation. Firstly, I'll be discussing the brief history of the club before moving on to the fan base, the women at the Doncaster Rovers, the globalisation of the club, and a quick summary at the end. In regards to the club history, it was founded in 1879 by Great Northern Railway worker Albert Jenkins. 6 years later, the club moved to their first permanent home, the Intake Ground, where they also had their first cup competition, Sheffield and Hallamshire FA Minor Cup. Doncaster were first elected into the Football League in 1901, and this is where they would spend the majority of their time. In 1923, the club would move to a new home named the Bellevue Stadium, in which they would stay there until 2006. In the 1946-47 season, Rovers set the record for the most wins in one season, winning 33 times as they went on to win the Third Division North title. In contrast, in 1998, Rovers were relegated out of the Football League with a -83 goal difference, mainly thanks to the poor ownership of Ken Richardson, which will be discussed later in the presentation. Things will start to turn good after this, however, as Doncaster fan John Ryan took over the club in 1999 and led Rovers back to the Football League in 2003. This led to further success in the 2007-08 season, as Donny would be promoted to the Championship for the first time in over 50 years, beating Leeds in the League One player final. Despite staying in the Championship for 4 seasons, Doncaster now find themselves in League Two in the football pyramid, with 2 relegations in recent years. The first topic I'm going to talk about is the fan base. Grab et al. States that football was and still is some and still is for some one of the few remaining spaces in which it is still possible to have a sustained sense of shared collective experience. This shows how much the club will mean to any supporters of the club. In terms of Doncaster, this was evident in the late 90s during the Ken Richardson era. Ken Richardson withdrew his financial backing, and as a result of this, Doncaster was subject to an administration order. Better players left to ease some of the financial burden, but unfortunately the players who were left at Rovers were just not up to the task. This led to relegation out of the Football League and struck big protests from the fans. Mark Turner suggested that football without fans is nothing, and this certainly showed as Rovers fans made their voices heard, and with protests and banners, entering the pitch during games, and even making a fake funeral carrying a coffin down the road towards the ground, suggesting that the club was now dead due to Richardson's antics. Just weeks after Rovers were relegated, Richardson was found guilty of trying to set fire to the Rovers ground, which is pictured in the top right of the presentation slide. Apparently hoping to pay off the club's debts with the insurance money, further proving that the fans were justified in their protests. In more recent years, the fans have had a lot less to protest over due to the club being more sustainably run. However, some fans continued to after an underwhelming few years, but nowhere near to the extent during the Richardson era. Sports historian Richard Holt suggests that the football clubs enable communities to know themselves, and in doing so, help signify what differentiates one town, city, region, county, or nation from another, and that many of today's most successful clubs, and particularly the longest established clubs, have their origins in community organisations. This suggests how important the fans and the club should work together to make the community as positive as possible. Doncaster Rovers set up the Club Doncaster Foundation to improve their community's togetherness. There is a non-profit organisation that is This is a non-profit organisation that is self-funded charity that focuses on 4 areas. These 4 areas being education, health and well-being, schools and participation, and the NCS. They have 35 different projects in total that are set up to help the community. All players and fans get involved in this, shown notably in the 2018-19 season, where player Matty Blair won the Community Player of the Year in the league for his highly involved contribution. As well as the club winning the Family Club of the Year, mainly for their family-friendly atmosphere, which was created for all types of fans within the community. It is not only the men's team that contributes to the community, with the women's team, Donny Bells, contributing similarly. The main one being, instead of having their annual Christmas Secret Santa, instead they use the money to buy the gifts and food for the food bank. As well as this, both men and women teams set up the scheme for the month of December, which meant if you brought an item for the food bank, you would get free entry to the Bells game, and to the men's game, you'd get a £5 discount off the ticket. This was also valid for the away supporters. Fans also get involved with the fans setting up Fit Rovers with the Club Doncaster Foundation. This is a fitness course run by the fans for people over the age of 30 who exercise weekly and suggest healthy food plans for each other. This is all free of charge, outlining another good thing that Doncaster has done as a whole. Next topic is the women in Doncaster Rovers. I'll be starting off by talking about the Doncaster Bells, who were founded in 1969, and in the 53 years that the club has been around, they've been very successful, having won 2 Premier League national titles, the highest league in women's football at the time, along with 6 FA Women's Cup titles. Despite the trophies won in the history, the Bells' recent success has come in the lower leagues due to a financially driven decision from the FA. In 2013, the FA demoted Doncaster Bells, which had nothing to do with their position in the league, as the season was only 1 game in, and was replaced them with Manchester City women. The manager of the Arsenal women's team at the time, Vic Ackers, described the decision as morally scandalous. One of the criteria in the Women's Super League is to do with finances, and it was said that the Bells' finances was not up to scratch, whereas newly added into the league Manchester City women's finances were. Many fans and staff of other teams also heavily disagreed with this decision. However, the manager who took over the Bells the season after suggested it was probably the right decision due to the club being heavily in debt. Bells now see themselves in the 4th division in English Women's League, narrowly missing out on promotion last year. They're hoping this year they can return to success and in a few years' time get back into the Women's Super League where they belong. Jennifer Hargreaves wrote that sport always has been closely associated with masculinity. This can lead to men not wanting women at games or maybe shout abuse. After asking the Doncaster Women's Supporters Group, this is why they did actually set up the group. Their aim was/is to eliminate the stereotypes of sexism and to make sure that everyone can feel welcome in football. This is also linked with the hashtag #HerGameToo campaign, which is running throughout the Football League. It's where the Doncaster women fans can meet up with fellow women fans of other teams to discuss the game before and after the match, and make friends along the way so that they can feel more comfortable. This is a brilliant campaign that the women have set up and is a big step in the right direction to ensure that all women feel comfortable at games and that the abuse is stopped. Donna Lennon states globalisation as being the rapid integration of trade and culture between the world's nations, which in recent years is what Doncaster Rovers owners have tried to increase. In 2016, the club announced that their new kit would be sponsored by Thailand business FBT, and Chief Executive Gavin Baldwin hoped that this would open doors for the club in Thailand, including leading to pre-season tours in the country. This was done in hope to get some new fans across the world and increase revenue and opportunities for the club. Unfortunately, the club are no longer sponsored by FBT and didn't get the pre-season tour in Thailand like most fans wanted. The owners have also tried to have a better globalisation by managing to get some of the games that have been recently played at the Rugby World Cup at the Eco Power Stadium, which is where Doncaster Rovers play their home games. The owners have done this to increase the publicity of the club and the city to try and become more well known globally. By more teams coming over from around the world, the more people have heard of Doncaster Rovers, which can only be a good thing for the club. Another aspect of globalisation at the club, and it may come to a surprise, is former One Direction star Louis Tomlinson. In 2014, the Doncaster-born singer made his debut for his hometown club in the under-23s match against local rivals Rotherham. Although Louis had played football before, it was nowhere near the standard of the professional game. This was mainly just as a publicity stunt to get eyes from around the globe. It worked as there was fans from Mexico at the game. Doncaster Rovers' Twitter account gained a lot more followers on the back of this. After this game, a few months later, Lou had decided he wanted to be more involved in the team that he grew up watching. So he decided to mount a takeover bid with then chairman John Ryan. Unfortunately, this bid fell through as he failed the EFL fit and proper test. This, however, put a lot of eyes on the club from all over the globe, getting new fans from Louis Tomlinson's fan base and also new opportunities for business at the club. This shows that Doncaster Rovers over the years have had a few positives within the club, with the community work and the recent start-up of the women's campaign, but also some negatives with the protests and the failed ownerships. Hopefully, over the next few years, there can be a lot more positives, and the community work can continue to thrive, and the campaigns can continue to be more impactful. Thank you for listening to my presentation on Doncaster Rovers.